Hello, my name is Cheryl Wilson and I am an abstract painter, and thank you again for joining my channel. These paintings are done on very fine 140-pound 9 by 12-inch watercolor paper. And the uniqueness of these is I just played and did some things that were a little bit interesting. Some of them were not my favorites. I tweaked them until they turned into something I really loved, but not all of the ones that I did I fell in love with. But the process that I used, and you'll see on this one, and you'll see on a couple coming up, was actually it was dirty water because I wanted a very toned down. I didn't have any gray toned paper. So I wanted to tone the paper down to something like a very beige color. And so I put water down on the paper, and my water was dirty. My paintbrush uh, drew the dirty water. And then you'll see as I paint another thing that I did that I will probably do from now on, because it was a very interesting way that the paint and the water and everything kind of just came together. And so several of these, in fact, three of these have already sold before I even actually got them up on my website. I put them out on social media and they sold. They really turned out pretty. A couple of them have more color in them, and I'm kind of favoring these ones that have the very muted, kind of like dirty water tone to them. As I go, I'll tell you the titles of these and show you these a little more up close. Now, this one almost looked like a face to me. It was almost like a figure in the silent and then the deep. And this was done on Halloween or near Halloween, so it kind of fits. But this was one of the ones that was sold too. Some of the marks I made after I filmed, and I do that a lot because I will sit back and look at a painting, and I have my list, and I've spoken about this before, of my favorite marks. So you'll see me go in many times after a painting I think is done, and I add my marks. But that's just part of who we are as artists. Are our paintings ever all the way done? I've known artists that have, in fact, I've done this, that have had their shows up on display, and they see something they want to tweak, and they go in and tweak it right there when their art is up on display, and I'm guilty of that. This one was an unusual one. I wanted to interject this before it passed by, but this was done with the black and white with the dirty water. And then I have a whole area that I collect papers, and that's what this was. This was a piece of paper I ripped up. It's all handmade paper. It's done on like a deli paper, and that's just some paintbrush swipes onto the paper. And I loved that adding to this particular painting, and so it struck me as something I loved and enjoyed, so I added it. And then I did a couple that had more color in them. This was one of them, and it turned out okay. The thing that I loved about this is, again, the green are added mixed media pieces of paper that I made. They're homemade papers. And then, of course, the gel pen. So when you're done with your pieces of art and you wonder what's missing, go back and add your own marks to it. So let's get into the paintings, and I'll show them all here. And some of them are my favorites. Some are still kind of like a work in progress. Now, these first couple are just kind of warming up. I have a jelly jar that I cleaned out the jelly, of course, ate it. It was black cherry, I think, was great. And I added black high flow golden paint. And I just dip a brush in there. You can dip a fan brush, you can dip a branch, you can dip all sorts of things. One of the videos I showed where I dipped a piece of driftwood and sticks, and I used that. So you can use just about anything and dip it in there, and it was just kind of like just to get me warmed up. So I'm going to put the rest of this on a fast forward, and sometimes these are very beautiful, framed as a diptych or a triptych, or used as an underpainting in other pieces of art. So they're a great way to warm up, get started, and then they're great to use as creations of art in other paintings if you don't like them just like this. So on this painting, I am not sure if this is one of the first ones I did, or it was further in the process, but I was experimenting, and this is something I talk about a lot, to take chances. Don't continue to paint the same things over and over again when you're in experimenting mode. Some of the biggest breakthroughs I have been when I have just experimented and taken risks. If you continue to paint the same thing over and over again, you're going to get stuck. And a lot of artists say, okay, well, I have found my zone, I found my artistic style, and you know what? That's great if that's where you're at. But if you still have this inner desire within you that you want to try something new, then that inner desire, that the thing that's driving you to do that, really does need to come out. So paper is a great place to do this. Painting on paper and painting on canvas are two different things. I've told several artists to try both because you may or may not like one or the other. But as I was playing, one thing I realized when I wet my paper and I added the paint, and then when I used this heat dryer, it dried the paint very quickly, and my art room was cool, but something very fun happened on this paper, and it soaked down in to the watercolor paper. People say, do you gesso your watercolor paper before you paint? And no, I don't. And this is exactly one of the reasons why after the fact that I don't, is because you can get some very unique things happening. So and that's it's like a hair dryer, but it's more like a heat gun the way I use it. I put it on high and it blew the paint kind of in tendrils, but it just blew the paint, and it just soaked into the watercolor paper so beautifully and dried quickly. Many times I'll just set them to the side to dry themselves, but there was something about the way that the heat soaked the paint. And have I done that before? Maybe I've done that, but I don't know. For some reason, it just struck me this time that the paint just was soaking down in the paper, and it turned out to be very beautiful. You'll see in a couple others where I made them more of not as much paint on the paper. I kept it a very minimalistic look. But I was enjoying this process, and this particular painting kind of just came, and I have stopped here? Sure. But I had some beautiful pink sitting to the side that I had been using on some other paintings. I just grabbed that and added it as a very soft pink with water. And so I just added that, and I was happy I did. But at any point you could stop in your paintings when you're doing a very minimalistic looking painting. So I'm going to just mute my voice and let you watch the rest of this painting, and then we'll get into a couple of the others that are more of a minimalistic look, that of the ones that are already sold, and you'll see why I enjoyed the simplicity of these others. So I sped up the process, but I also added the final painting off to the right there. And you'll see what I did was, when I was done, I took a gel pen and did my circles, which I love adding circles to my paintings. And then I took strips of green, and those are just some of my handmade papers. And I have a couple videos, I think, out there on handmade papers. And I just added strips of handmade papers, and then the dots. I have an awful lot of tissue paper with dots on it, or deli paper with dots. So I just added handmade papers to this, and you see that tool that's like a catalyst, where that's a swipe that I do with several tools. It's a circular swipe that I do in many of my paintings. There it is right there. So many of the additional marks you see are the additional marks that I make on a continual basis on the list of things that I love. And you've probably heard me talk about that before. So I wanted you to see the finished painting. So this next painting actually turned out to be my favorite of this bunch. I had like 3 or 4, and my favorite sold. So many times you'll know when you paint a painting that turns out to be something that just turns out a good painting, I guess you could call it. Or one that has a good composition. Maybe that's the better word. But this one was a concept that I probably did this before, but I didn't really realize. But it was adding a very wet paint, and that's a mixture of several paints and dirty water, and adding that to my watercolor paper and drying it immediately. And the tendrils just pushed off to the sides and created a very organic, natural, beautiful look. And I left all the tendrils because that's what I loved. And it was the combination of the kind of like a dirty water paint mixture that I had. This one was a combination of paint and dirty water and very wet paint on the 120 pound, this is our artisia paper, and blow drying it with a hair dryer or a heat gun right away. Now you'll see when I put down marks and the wet paint, I always rub some of them out. I sometimes don't want you to know what was done first. Did I make the marks first and paint on top, or did I do it the opposite way? So therefore, if you rub some of the marks out, it doesn't look like you've just plopped the marks on top. Again, this is the high flow, the carbon black high flow with golden. And I'm adding it with a rigger brush, which is a brush with a very long, like a bunch of long, it's, a lot of scapers, I think, use it. And then I'm squirting it, making it just, again, very organic look. This would have been great to use a branch from outside. Rigger brush was what I was using today, but you could have used a branch from outside, a twig. One of my last videos had a piece of driftwood I got at the beach when I went to the beginning of October. And the organicness of the marks is what makes this so beautiful, along with the minimalistic type of look here. And then you'll see me grab the pencil, or you could use a graphite or a piece of charcoal. And then I made some more marks in there while it was still wet. And the black paint drug with the pencil mark. And then I added afterwards the writing with a piece of tissue paper on that one. I absolutely love this painting. Now this next one, again, just started. I squirted the paper on this one with some water. And then I just dipped my dirty brush in the water and then took some of the gray blends I had already going there and just added it to the paper. And again, I'm thinking I am going to keep this a very simplistic, very minimalistic look. And so that's kind of what I'm after on this particular painting. But I'm still, looking at composition, looking at, where do I want the eye to flow. And so that's why I'm adding some white, and then I'm adding some black, and I'm just, going back and forth. I'm blending the sides there just to give it a very organic look, because I enjoy the organicness of some of the other paintings that I was working on. So this one I just tried to do a blot. That was a piece of deli paper, just blotted down in. And again, it's, excuse me, it's play, risk taking, play, risk taking. I had black in the bottom, very heavy black in the bottom. So that's why I turned around and added some black at the top. Sometimes I'll just add a dot of black up at the top just to pull the eye so it looks both ways. And again, the whole painting was heavy at the bottom, so I added a little bit of the white contrast there. And that was a thicker paint, so it didn't meld in. I'm sorry for my head. I hate that. I did get my hair colored the next day. I'm 65 and I do have gray hair. So, that's just the way it is. So I'm going in on some of these and making it more of a clean line, and other places more of a blurred line. Just kind of like, I find that if you have a little bit of both in your painting, kind of like the opposites attract, then you've got something interesting. So on this particular one, the gel pen, as you see the painting over there to the right, where the painting is actually turned upside down, was added afterwards when it was dry. You never add the gel pen, the white gel pen, when it's wet, because you ruin your pen. I've done that many times. So you can see that the gel pen was added afterwards. And then the red stripe. It was just something that I felt, at the very end there, that I wanted to do, just to kind of give it an unusual look. And that's where the red line came in. on this next one, again, this has sold, but it was another very minimalistic. I brought in some of the yellows and a lot of these colors that I had. And by the way, that's the rigger brush. Again, you could have used a stick or something. A lot of the colors I have, they've all been blended off to the side, and that's something that you can do is just add, blend your colors together. But being this is just a very minimalistic painting, there's not a lot of colors that I added to this. But I'm not quite sure where I'm going. So again, I'm just playing and I'm rubbing in paint. I'm using my fingers a lot. And you'll see me, I always add graphite and writing. And then you'll see off to the side there is a piece of the tissue paper that has the writing on it that I added. It just seems to blend itself perfectly for this one. And this painting was, I think I gave it the title, Torqued Emotions. So I'm looking at the painting, and I could have gone with the same, and I'm not looking at these as a series. I was doing these as individual paintings. So when I added the tan color or the light yellow color in there, it wasn't because it was to go with anything else. It's just it was a color that I gravitated toward when I was painting this. And you also see the black mark at the bottom, and again that is to bring in the cohesiveness of the eye flowing around the canvas. And sometimes your signature, if you sign your signature in black and you had a painting like this, that may be all it would need. You may not need it to have had a mark at the bottom. Or another thing I could have done, which really was done with that tissue paper, was everything in here was square, was round, and then the one tissue paper was square. So it gave it a difference between the two. And then the lines that I add in here was a good balance from the circular marks that I put in a painting. If you put too much of the same mark in a painting, sometimes the eye's like, well, I want something more interesting. It's I had someone I was listening to paint say it's almost like go on vacation. If you go to the same place every year, sometimes you get bored. You want something different, and so that's kind of like the same concept. If you have a lot of circular motions in your painting, you may want to add some squares. If you have a lot of squares or lines in a painting, you may want to add something circular to just give it a different look, to give the eye something to be interested in. So as I go through, I'm just playing with I don't want to say composition, because I don't look at composition. I do look at balance of where my marks are on the paper. I do look at balance, if you want to call this composition, of where the dark and the lights are in a painting. And I do try to feel what is basically, what am I craving in the painting? What do I feel like it's asking for? And I know that sounds like an easy thing to say, but I think the more you paint, the more you start to get used to looking at your painting and knowing from the marks that you love yourself what marks you want to add. If you get stuck, go back to your paper. I have the paper that's sitting there, marks I love. In fact, I was all day yesterday. I got the booster COVID shot, so I was kind of under the weather. So I just had a notebook beside me, and and I was watching some movies, and anytime I saw a mark that interested me, I wrote it in my book. So, I have another bunch of marks, and I love to write backwards in my paintings. You'll see that in a lot of my larger ones. And I do love scribbles, and I love like sgraffito in my paintings. So you'll see that. So, this is where I start in on some of my marks and changing it up a little bit. I like a very messy approach to my abstracts. I just am not a person that likes neatness. The messier I am, the better I seem to like my art. It's just my preference, personal preference. And any marks that you may not see here that you see on the painting to the right was added later, and that's something that you'll get used to doing, is going back on your painting to finish them off and adding I did the word emotion off to the right there on the circle. You'll get used to that. All right, this next one is kind of a long one, but I sped up the part of it at the end so that you didn't have to watch all of it. But again, this is dirty water that I have added to the watercolor paper. Again, it's 140 pound. It's Artesia. It's a nice watercolor paper, and when I do that, it is beautiful when I hit the heat on it. That's a rigger brush, and that is the high flow golden black, carbon black. And I'm really, really loving adding the heat to this. And you'll see just what happens to it. It's just something about it just is a beautiful effect. And it's kind of staying within the bounds of where the water is on the paper, like watercolor. I don't do a lot of watercolor. I'm certainly not a traditional watercolorist. When I do watercolor, I kind of just do my own thing. But when I took the heat and blew it over there, some of the paint dried quicker than the other, and it just came out kind of like a figure. And that's why I called this the vision of silent figure. It just looked like a figure to me. So I'm continuing, and on the bottom, I play with adding graphite and spreading the paint with a catalyst, adding additional black paint to it, and you'll see how I smear the paint down into the watercolor paper. And what you see afterwards on the painting, those are all added papers and napkins. Now, I've mentioned this before in another video. I'll mention it here. When you add a napkin, and that little small dots is a napkin, a lot of times I'll take tissue paper and make my own. But when you do that, make sure you take the ply and separate it, so you only have one ply of the napkin that you're adding. So that's what I added afterwards, just to kind of give the silent figure maybe some clothes. So I'm just playing with this bottom part, adding drips, making it very messy, which is what I love, and just making the body of his shirt or her shirt or whoever the figure is. So again, a lot of times when I'm done with a painting, I will go back later and look at the balance of the dark and the light, and then add my gel pen. The white gel pen was added later, just a little scribbling. And then I added some additional tissues and papers and homemade papers on this one. I'm going to do a couple more, and I'm actually going to do them in fast speed because I'm repeating, but I wanted you to see the finished painting and kind of just the same type of a concept where I put the dirty water that is grayed on the paper, and this one I'm just drawing into the paper with, or the wet, with a graphite, a pencil graphite. And because it's wet, and because it was sitting next to some blue paint, it picked up the blue. And I went ahead and just went with it at the bottom. But when it hits the wet, it is, the graphite gets more dynamic and brighter. And so you can have the same tool and it do a couple different things. So again, since the paper is very wet and I haven't dried it yet, I'm just adding some more of that high flow and just playing with it. And as soon as the hair dryer hits the paper, I just feel the magic happens and it just blends in, and some of the tendrils happen, and the very organic look, and it just soaks into that watercolor paper, which I really am enjoying the immediate results of what happens. You can see over to the right the white gel pen that I added afterwards, and you'll actually see me add that piece of tissue paper into this one. And then you'll see me at the top add some of the black just to bring the eye up there, because it's kind of heavy at the bottom and I wanted the eye to float up to the top. So I add a little bit of the paint at the top to kind of give it a balance, to balance out the bottom. And I'm sorry, but my camera is still touching the table. I have to move it over even more than I did, and so it doesn't shake. But I'm trying my best to give you good quality. So I hope you'll forgive me when I still have mistakes until I get really better equipment and more professional equipment. So there, you saw me try a couple different pieces of tissue paper until I got one that I liked. And I still am looking at this point saying, okay, it's a little off balance. And that's when I go in and add that little bit of black at the top, just to kind of give it that last balance of the whole piece. And, you know, it could have been a square, it could have been whatever, it could have been a dot, but I like that last little addition. And here's the last one. And again, this one is a lot of the same concept. I use the dirty water. I'm using the black. I'm using organic shapes. And then as you see, this is called effective boundaries. As you see on the right, I added two pieces of homemade paper, and that's just regular drawing paper that I've painted green and added some different design to it. And it could have been a painting like this that I may not have liked, that I ripped up. But either way, adding additional papers and just the kind of the juxtaposition between the pink and the green, I thought was fun. There, I want to add some pink, so I'm putting some water in there, some quinacridone magenta, and some titanium white, and just mixing till I get a very liquidy white. And I wanted the liquidy to kind of match what I was already doing, and the very watery paint. And then you'll see on the right, you'll see the painting that I've added the white gel pen. I've done that a lot on these. I do that a lot. I'll go back in. And like I said, I don't always show you that because a lot of those marks are, again, they need to be your marks. They need to be marks that you've added that you have in your artist toolbox that you add. Like me, I like writing words. A lot of times I'll write words backwards, as I've mentioned. So this painting is actually upside down from what the finished painting turned out to be. But I think you get the idea when you're seeing me create this. So I hope you've enjoyed these paintings. I hope they've been a little bit different than some of the others I've done. And they're fun to do. I love the concept of the wet paint and drying it real quickly. And that's what I wanted to show you in these. So I hope you enjoyed these. Ask me any questions. The algorithm gives me shows me a little bit more and helps me grow. If you like my video, if you make a comment or just give me a thumbs up, I would love that. And I'm still trying to grow. I'm still trying to create things that you want. Let me know if there's different things that you do want. And I'm open to creating and giving you the things that you think you might want as an artist. And if I have something I can share, I will certainly do that for you. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and continue watching this one until it's done.